Dr. Jaishankar, first on behalf of the Raisina Young Fellow family, the Bisuiris Summer School family, the sister organization in Germany, I want to thank you for joining us this evening and continuing with the tradition of your engaging with the young fellows post Raisina. Since we've had 3 light days, what better way to unwind than a wonderful conversation with the young fellows. So thank you very much, sir. I'll get straight to the point. The why and what of the book. What motivated you to write this? Why have you felt the need to be doing this now? And what are the key messages that you want to actually communicate through this book?
First of all, Samir, let me say thank you. Thank you to you and thank you to all of you. I think we've had 3 very energetic days at Raisina, and as I said at the start, at the end of the day, you have the people who come and speak, but it's the people who participate, it's the people who listen, it's the people who interact, who make all the difference, and that's all of you. Okay, why did I do this book at this particular point of time? A large part of foreign policy today is about communication. It's not just what you decide, what are your choices. It's very important to explain that to everybody else. So I am in the business of explanation in addition to being in the business of policy making. And if you explain well enough and long enough, then somewhere in your mind you start thinking, okay, I can actually make a thesis of it. I did that a few years ago with a book. To me it was very interesting after I wrote the first book. I wrote that first book when it came out when I was a minister, but I didn't write it when I was a minister. But as years passed, we saw a lot of big events happen. The conflict in Ukraine, now what's happening in Gaza, the COVID, which to me was really a once-in-a-century shock, Afghanistan, climate events, economic stresses of various kinds. So as you dealt with all of this, and then in India, we had a country which was profoundly changing. Mm-hmm. So it crossed my mind that if someone, if there were big changes, who best to explain those changes than someone who's actually in it, who's inside the room, who's part of the decision making, who's able to communicate the considerations that go into this, and really that's why the book. Now, what is the book about? I think it's obviously about the state of the world, the longer trend of rebalancing, but the shocks that I've referred to. It's about globalization, the advances of globalization, but the shortcomings, the problems created by globalization. It's about technology and digital, and how, again, they hold such great promise, but they have made us, in many ways, so vulnerable. It's about telling people not involved in foreign policy why foreign policy matters to you. Because for many years, certainly in my country, but I suspect in yours as well, a lot of people said, well, that's not our problem, somebody is taking care of it. But I travel around the country telling people, look, something happened, there was COVID. You heard about it, you saw it on social media, you heard about it on TV, and it came to your homes, it took over your lives. Or what we saw as a consequence of the conflict in Ukraine, the energy hikes, the price hikes, the food shortages in many parts of the world. So the idea that really foreign policy matters to everybody. And then there were some very specific issues. I think much of the world is interested in, what happens between India and China. How does the Quad work? Why was it necessary to do Quad? And when there's so much churn within India, there's a different conversation, which is we have reached this point, but did we always take the right roads? Whether choices we could have made, we didn't. Whether roads that we did not take, and where could it have led to? And many of those roads pertain to key accounts like China, Pakistan, and the United States. But most of all, I wrote the book because I was really convinced it was important to present an argument today why, whether you are, a national of this country or whether you are someone someone living abroad, it's important to understand really why Bharat matters. That we will be bigger in everybody's lives in the coming decade and in the coming century.
In fact, that brings me to an interesting thought I had. We spoke about your first book. I think it was during the pandemic, literally in between some waves. I remember we were masked up and having a conversation on the book. It was titled The India Way. Mm-hmm. And your second book was called Bharat Matters. So the titles have gone a bit of a transformation. You moved from India to Bharat. And the first one was about the way, the second is about India's significance in people's lives. What led to this change of both the visualization of the country as such and its role?
Well, I think when I used the word Bharat in the second book, Why Bharat Matters, as opposed to the India Way, I'm trying to capture really a kind of the transformation which has taken place in our society, in our polity, in our mindset, in our approach to the world. And in many ways, you have, if you look at, the thought processes which are driving us today, I would say they are much more authentic, they are much more deeply rooted in our culture, in our traditions, in our heritage. So that is one part of it. And there's a bigger exercise in the world of cultural rebalancing, that we've seen economic rebalancing particularly through globalization. We have seen political rebalancing, but the third phase of it is really today cultural rebalancing. So there's a bigger conversation there which is going on as well. And India, which is much more conscious of its culture, history, and traditions, which, for example, remembers its linkages. I give you a very practical example. The Gulf. The Gulf, our linkages with the Gulf are as old as the monsoon. That people traversed this space because of the winds. And yet, a region which is so close to us, with which we had such deep linkages, somewhere in the quest for modernity, we let go of that connection. The same applied actually to the oceans, that if you look at the islands in the Indian Ocean, or if you look east of India, that you can actually find even today, very significant evidence of major Indian civilizations, which were sort of all the way up to the east coast of China. So part of it is also today, once you start thinking of yourself as a civilizational state, you remember your culture, your traditions, you then you revisit, your history. You draw from that. And once you do that, you get a different level of confidence. You have difficult situations where you think of yourself, as I do, that, look, I speak really for a polity which has been there for thousands of years. So you take your decisions with a certain both with a certain confidence, but also with a certain deliberation of the consequences of it for years ahead. And then there is a self-reliant side to it, which is, you want to be less vulnerable, you want to be less dependent, you want to be a player, you don't want to be a playing field. So I think it was a combination of all these factors. I felt we had made that transition, especially in the last 5 years. And that's why the title of the second book as opposed to the first.
So can I just ask you a question on your travels and meetings with your peers in different countries, foreign ministers and diplomats and others who engage with you? When they read your book or when they hear about your book or are briefed about your book, and especially the second one, Why Bharat Matters, have they ever asked you any question about that book? Have they posed any question?
Well, the first question I get is, you're a foreign minister, where do you get the time, or why are you writing a book? Honestly, I think people have started reading the book. I've got a few interested questions, actually not questions. A lot of what I've got is, I didn't know some of these things. So it's more like I plugged a gap in their understanding rather than I presented them with a challenge. But I think next year's Raisina, I could answer that question more honestly.
Okay. So, and finally, before we, I'm going to be now beginning the process of your asking questions. So, be ready, and you can actually walk up to the mic. There are, I think, two of them, if I can see, 1 and 2. But as you work up on that, my final question to you. You have said, and it was actually mentioned in one of the conversations that Raisina, preparing India for the world and preparing the world for India. Can I ask you, is the world prepared for India?
Not fully. Not fully because I'm tempted to say they ain't seen anything yet. But my sense is, if you had asked people across the world 5 years ago what they expected of India, what they thought of India, I think you'd have got a very different answer than you'd get today.
No.
And I give you a very, a very specific example of that. When COVID started, the first big meeting, which was, by the way, a G20 meeting, it was a virtual meeting, and we had this briefing about how COVID was going to ravage the world, which was largely accurate. And one of the big points of concern at this collective meeting was how India would fare. So the general expectation in the world would be that if there was one society, one country which was really going to take a hit, it would be us. Events turned out very differently. Now, not just coming out of COVID. If you look at the economic recovery after COVID, if you look today at investor sentiment, market sentiment, we are getting back to about 7% growth rate. You look at a lot of the digital sort of gains we have made. In fact, from being the country you worry about, this is now a country which has started to create practices and examples which are relevant to the rest of the world. So, my sense is, give it a few more years, this will get deeper and deeper into people's minds.
Great. So let's start with the questions. Kira, can I ask you to ask the first one? You should do it one at a time. I think it might be better. Or do you want to take a note?
Maybe I see what.
There are quite a few. So
maybe 3 at a time.
Maybe 3 at a time. Okay. So let's start with Kira. Kira, let's go ahead.
Kira Finke, German Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you so much for this discussion, also for sharing your book with us. My question is on India's climate foreign policy. What are its primary goals, and how do you see India and Europe advancing them together. Thank you.
Okay. Let's turn to Rajiv Mantri on the other mic.
Good evening, everyone. So India's positioning today in the world, where we have good relations going on with the US, with Iran, with Russia, and seemingly disparate non-allied countries, if I can call them that. So you mentioned about the importance of explaining, communicating in diplomacy. If you can shed some light for us on how India has achieved this, if I can call it almost an impossible trilemma or a unique positioning in the world, and it has been a masterclass in diplomacy. So I think many people in the room would like to learn in a mechanistic manner how India has been able to achieve that.
So basically what he's saying is they will say something at a press conference, but when they're privately sitting with you, they say, I want that too. I want to be able to do that too. I think that's the question Rajiv is asking. Okay, let's move to, I want a mix. So let's move to Alexandra. I want to mix the geographies here. I'm not, like we do in our fellowship, I'm going to mix the geographies. Alexandra.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. My question is on India-Central Asian relations. Today, the 5 Central Asian countries are increasingly operating as a group. So today, in the past 2 years in particular, vis-a-vis major powers and regional entities as a so-called C5+1 format. And India was among first actors to initiate meeting in this format. So my question is, what importance do you or does Indian foreign policy attribute to Central Asia in this changing global order, in this transforming global order? And do you think that Central Asia can become a middle power and contribute to more global cooperation?
I think there are 3 questions.
Sure. So the first issue, the climate foreign policy. Well, if you look actually at the last decade, it's very interesting that you had India, which was often perceived as the difficult country in the room, come up with ideas and suggestions and innovations and initiatives. So at COP21, we actually started the International Solar Alliance. At the COP26, we were pushing the, what was called the one sun, one world, one grid, the idea that you could actually imaginatively take renewables across the world. There were other initiatives like building for disaster resilience. In fact, before the G20, there was even the message that climate change is not something you should leave necessarily to governments to do, that each one of us can make a difference. And we can make a difference by changing our own lifestyle. So if we actually had a lifestyle which was friendly for environment, that itself would, if you add up 7 billion lifestyles, you would get some concrete result out there. What we have seen in this country, one of course has been a massive expansion of solar energy. One of the new programs which has been announced this year is actually the rooftop solarization, so that every house in a sense is in an individual manner is adding to to the renewable usage. I would say there's been a kind of a shift in the thinking of people. There's a much greater awareness which is encouraged by the government about taking lifestyle choices, about taking policy choices. You can see an expansion in public transport, mass transport, for example. Now, having said all that, the reality is also that it's very difficult to make very dramatic transformations, because transformations also have their own, they have their own complications. If you take, for example, coal, there would be many, many countries in the world who would still, for livelihood in terms of resources that they have, for them coal is the one which is most readily available. So a lot of the answers in coal is just like you transition on other forms of fossil fuel, is also whether you can lighten the burden of coal, for example, through coal gasification. But there would be, the transition out of fossil fuel, oil to gas, that's, also a challenge. But we need to look today at the new dependencies that, renewables are creating, that we are all solarizing madly. Now, where are those panels coming out of? Where's the battery storage technology? So, are we actually in a geopolitical way, a geo-economic way, are we actually creating new vulnerabilities for ourselves? I think that's really a question also that needs to be addressed. So it is a complex debate, but I definitely would say when I see, let us say, starting from Kyoto to Dubai, the journey which COP has made, I would certainly say that this country and this country's policy has evolved very much in a direction which is sensitive to climate change.
Her question was India-EU partnership there.
Yeah, on India-EU partnership, in fact, we have a practical partnership with, we have a partnership with individual countries. We have a partnership with EU as a whole. One example which comes to my mind is really the collaboration we had with Germany to create the grids which were necessary for the solarification to increase very rapidly. But even in terms of technology, we are very much in conversation with the EU on how we can both really be much more self-reliant when it comes to renewable technologies. On the second issue, this positioning, how do you handle contradictory accounts? Look, the first thing, to be honest, is not to be too clever. I don't go to one place and say something and go to another place and say something completely different. Because at the end of the day, people talk to each other. People know at every place, they have a sense of what's been the conversation. So I think actually leveling with people, putting out a point of view, being helpful at times. Sometimes I go to a place, some examples were mentioned by the questioner. So, you go to, say, Tehran, and you hear very bitter complaints about some other countries. Now, I think at times serving as a communication helps. At times telling countries, look, you really need to hear this. Now, if you level with countries, you can actually, it's a bit like my talking to you. If I'm your friend, I can put my arm around your shoulder and say, look, I'm your friend and you really need to hear this from me. And you can say some very difficult things. Once you get the impression that you don't have an axe to grind, you're not being clever, you're not playing one off against the other, your idea, your objective is broadly a kind of a global good objective. That gives you a lot of cachet in this business. So I would say, sometimes people say, oh, you're a diplomat, why are you so blunt? Or why are you straightforward? Believe me, that's the best form of diplomacy. Because when you are straightforward and they think you are straightforward,
yes,
then people take what you say seriously and sincerely. They don't think you mean ill, they don't think you're putting them down. They take it for what it really is. So
has any diplomat who may have made a statement in a public forum which would have been criticizing you, has they come back in a back room, told you, actually, I understand you, I get you?
Well, not too
You
many.
can also name them if you want, but since
No. Look, I've actually had people who've said, that, I give you an example, Chancellor Schulz, who actually has said that, I heard the Indian Foreign Minister say something, and maybe we need to reflect on it, that there's something to what
and he said that in a public forum.
Yeah,
Actually.
so I've not had a case where people have said something in public and come back and said something else.
Okay.
They've either been equally nasty or equally nice.
Okay.
So, and on the Central Asia, I spoke about the historical linkages. Look, this was a civilizational space whose influence was vast, whose influence really extended in a way from Japan to Europe, across the seas all the way to the north. And modern history, for a variety of reasons, treated us unkindly, and a lot of the responsibility is our own. So today, if we understand our history, understand the civilizational linkages, I look in each direction. I spoke to you about the Gulf. I look at the Indian, the oceans below, or Southeast Asia, but I equally look at Central Asia. That so much of Central Asia, throughout history, has been linked in multiple ways to us. And even today, those linkages, let me say, they don't go away. There's a kind of, at a societal level, there is still a resonance, there is a natural empathy. People pick up on it very quickly, you understand each other. So what we did 2 years ago was to start the C5+1. And we have today, these are all countries with whom we've always been very comfortable. But being comfortable and having a deep relationship are not the same thing. So we are, in different areas today, depending on the country. We are looking to deepen ties. A lot of it is in education, some of it is infrastructure, it's health. Health is a very big issue out there. It's energy, but it's also politics, it is strategy, it is security.
Okay. So the next three are Prasanna. I'll take your question. I'll take Rufus. You can come in too. And Hallelujah. And Hallelujah is actually a name. I'm not making it up. So let's start with you, Prasanna.
Thank you. So there's anecdotal evidence and also a strong case from an operational efficiency and even military effectiveness standpoints to go for unified theatre commands so far as the Indian Armed Forces are concerned. The Kargil Review Committee talks about it. The Jaishankar Report Committee talks about it. However, the progress that India has made in this regard has been abysmally slow. And given the growing interlinkages between a strong armed forces and geopolitics, given the rise of China, what is your view and also an honest assessment of India's trajectory towards a unified theatre commands? And also...
No, only one question. That's it. We have many more to get into.
Are you a military guy?
No, he used to serve under Mohan Parekarji in his office. So okay. he has.
So answer is kind of.
Kind of. I mean, not military, but yeah, nearly there. But his persistence was like that in wanting a second one as well. Okay, Rufus, let me get on to you.
Many thanks. Just a very quick question. The new kid on the block in terms of foreign policy is the feminist foreign policy, muted first by Sweden and then the rest of us caught up. So I'd just be very interested to hear your thoughts on, from an Indian perspective, what the feminist foreign policy means for India, because for us within the Africa context, many countries are really struggling with that. Thanks.
In the African context, you are struggling with this concept. Okay, sir. So feminist foreign policy. Okay, Hallelujah, third.
Thank you. My question is regarding the nuclear weapons. The past few years witnessed significant rise and escalation in the conception and use of nuclear weapons, and we've been hearing, for example, the possibility of tactical use of nuclear weapons by Russia. And in the past few weeks, we also witnessed, the US accusing Russia of aspiring to have nuclear weapons in the space, and we also read that Iran has weapon-grade uranium that could result in significant escalation.
Question, short and sharp, question.
So that was the context, and as a foreign minister of a nuclear power, and as a scholar who did his PhD on nuclear diplomacy, how worried are you about the possibility of a nuclear confrontation or the use of nuclear weapons in one way or another? Thank you.
Okay, can we take one more this turn? Okay, let me turn to Henry.
Hi. Right, so we've heard throughout the Raisina that the rise of India and that it would require more seats, more responsibility for India in the global arena. We hear all about the Permanent Security Council. Yet during your rotational turn in the Security Council a couple of years ago, there were quite a few vetoes. Now, that being said, what kind of a global actor would India be if it gets more seats and responsibility? And wouldn't that have a fundamental change on India's foreign policy and its nature if it would end the hedging position and sort of balancing between great powers if you'd have to take a stronger stand on issues?
Okay.
Are we going to take a stand? Are we going to hedge? That's the question.
Okay.
And so I think you mentioned something like that in the morning of how you portray choice. Anyways.
So let's start with the unified theater commands. I've largely observed the armed forces with a lot of interest and some responsibility from outside. I had the privilege of working with them directly in one part of my career. And I would say it's much easier to in a sense, analyze why a theater command should come about. And today, the merits of that are accepted. It's a very different task to actually make it happen. And this is not unique to India. I mean, if you look at other countries who have been through that process, the US is a very well-known example, the Goldwater-Nichols Act. But the whole debate which preceded and succeeded that, China has been through that experience. So I don't, some of the characterizations, the impatience of the analyst doesn't take into account the complications of the forces concerned. It's a much harder thing to do. There are many departures from the way we work. There are different assignations of responsibilities which come with it. So in many ways, you conceptualize, let me tell you, when you look at the world through theater commands, the world itself looks to you very differently than it does when you have, in a sense, three forces and each service has its own command. So I would, I understand your sentiments and your enthusiasm for this. As I said, as a fundamental concept, today that is accepted in this country, but I think you need to bear with all the the wrinkles and the second, third order effects of such a change being implemented. The feminist foreign policy, that's kind of interesting to me because in my, one of our objectives in the G20 was to push for women-led development. And to my surprise, I found it a bit of a tough sell. It didn't get as readily embraced as I thought it would. But in different ways, I see it featuring, in our foreign policy. We actually, when it came to climate change, the first question, we found that you could propagate a message and even build capabilities much more effectively if your resource people were women. So we had this very successful program called Solar Mamas, and these are people who particularly in the Pacific Islands, but in other places as well, have been individually trained and incentivized to look after solar facilities. When it comes to development projects, today India has development projects in roughly 80 countries across the world, 78 to be precise, more than 600 big projects. A lot of these actually have a significant gender sensitivity, which is built into it. So one part of it, therefore, is actually your policy. What are your goals? What are you looking to do? But the other part of it is example. So when we ourselves today legislate that 1/3 of your members of parliament or members of legislature will be women, if we have policies which are designed to address gender gaps of various kinds in education, in health, I think that too
and you also had a statistic last, and I'm forgetting the numbers, but the number of women diplomats today in the newer batches you had mentioned.
So I was going to kind of conclude with that. So one part of it is your vision, your goals, your mission in a way. One part of it is how do you implement that? And we certainly have seen in the Indian Foreign Service a very significant rise in the number of women, we welcome that in many ways, because I think it gives us a much broader perspective of how particularly to look at our interaction with the world. If I were to move to something completely different, which is the nuclear weapon question, the tactical use is not a new debate. There was a big debate in the 60s and 70s about the viability of the use of tactical weapons and the fire break and what it would mean, the escalatory ladder. And I think a lot of the arguments which were historical remain relevant. The nuclearization of space, that's a different ballgame. And I know that today it's part of the contemporary debate. So would I be worried about the direction of what is happening in that space? I would be, I am concerned today. Who would not be concerned if there were new conflicts and conflicts going in directions which we did not anticipate? So, it could be Ukraine, it could be Gaza, it could be something else. So, the fact that you have, as we advance, as technology also matures, the same conflict today becomes much more potent, it becomes much more, in a way, difficult to game, to predict than it was before. So, certainly, it would be a very, very sanguine person who would say, I have no worries. But I would balance it with the remark that, much of these debates are not new debates. On the question on the, the rise of India, what did we were in the Security Council, so what did we do? Do we hedge? Do we balance? So there's a little bit of a definitional problem here. The problem is this. It's like I decide something, you decide something, and everybody else out here is told, choose sides or you're hedging. Okay. Now, maybe what looks as a hedge to you is actually my side. I have an equal right to define a side, to put forward my views. It's not like there are higher authorities out there who will define which sides we have, and there's a binary option, and anybody who doesn't exercise a binary option is a weak link. I don't think that's a fair description of the world. I think different countries have different interests, and I don't think there are two sides to any question anymore. There are many sides to many questions. And if there are many sides to many questions, I don't think everything is a hedge. when we use the word multipolar world on the one side, and then we say hedging, balancing, swing state. The guys who are accused of being hedging, balancers, swing states, actually will now end up as poles. So they own a side, they own a position, and they're going to have interests of their own. So they're not going to, be gamed by others who say, I will define the parameters, and this is the space, and this is the decision we want you to take. So the game's changing, and the game's not going to be defined.
I think now, next time, there should be 3 options in the UN votes. I, no, and rubbish. We should be able to say these are rubbish. And I think it's fair to say that, because sometimes the options given are rubbish. I think that's a good third option, sir. Our friend Michael gave you an idea for the composition. I'm giving you the idea for a voting system.
There must be an Australian word for rubbish.
Let me bring the last set of questions. I can only take 3 more because we are running out of time. And I had promised the minister I'm going to leave him by 9:50. So 3 more questions, short ones. I don't want context and I don't want speeches. I want just questions.
I want to ask you, after the elections this year, what India will focus in the international system, and are you considering it as a success? Thank you.
Okay, now let me bring Caitlin in front. I want the new batch to come in. I haven't heard my new ones. So please, Caitlin.
Hello, I'm Caitlin. I'm from Australia, and I'm part of
Since you mentioned an Australian, I wanted one.
I'm part of the Raisina Young Fellows program. I would like to know, you mentioned recently that the multiple personalities of a Hindu god equated to the relationship of the Quad plus France. You said when they meet, suddenly everything starts to work. I would like to hear you speak a little bit more about that, unpack it, and then talk about what priorities you see for the Quad Summit this year.
That's a very long question, but maybe a few priorities only, sir. Okay, let's go with my friend, Mohammed.
Okay, so my question is about BRICS. Last year, there was an expansion of BRICS that included some countries, including Egypt, my country. So what were the standards of choosing the new countries? What is the BRICS trying to achieve? And should the BRICS have a secretariat?
Where are you from?
Egypt. He's a diplomat from Egypt.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so it's a good question. What were the standards and what were the criteria, right? I am tempted to give it to Christoph. So Christoph, you've been standing there patiently. Go ahead with your question, but don't make it predictable because I know what you're going to ask. Now try to surprise me.
Yeah, I try. I would like to congratulate on the term cultural rebalancing. That's an observation. Thank you. And this is my question goes a little bit maybe surprising way. Every great power, every rising power, since Germany in the 30s to let's say China in the early 2000s, basically made itself prominent by the means of sports and games and Olympic Games. Do you think sports would be part of India's also role and presence in the world?
Thank you, Samir. I'll keep this.
You had that look on your face that compelled me to give it to you.
So my question is regarding the Indian diaspora that you will find in all corners of the world. They've achieved a huge amount of success in multiple fields, recently as political leaders. So I'd like to ask, how do you see the Indian diaspora and people of Indian origin contributing to your vision of Bharat?
So I think the first question was, after the elections, what would you define as success, right? Mm-hmm. So first of all, thank you that you are figuring out what the direction of the elections are going to be. That's very, very perceptive and wise of you. And what would I see as success? Well, so look, the last 10 years, I think in many ways, we have contributed more, we have been more visible, we have tried to shape things more, we have taken more responsibility. And I think every one of those aspects, and I can give you examples for each one of them, each one, they would grow. But sometimes it's good to put things in some kind of number. And the fact is that today we are a shade below $4 trillion. We would be almost double that by the time we finish the next term. So if you look in terms of resource, and what this, people use this GDP number as a marker, okay? It carries a lot of implications. It means your trade will become bigger, it means your investments would be more, it means your influence would be greater, your overall weight goes up in the system. So I would say in many ways that by the time we reach the end of the decade, it's very clear we would be the third largest economy. But more than that, some of the big changes which are taking place in the world, and to me, as I said, re-globalization, resilient supply chains, the idea of a global workplace where there's mobility, where new businesses, the chips, the semiconductors, the batteries, the electric mobility, the renewables, all of these would require a very different kind of international economy. And it's there that, we can bring our human resources really into play. And to me, when I, conceptualize the world ahead, these are to me the new factors of change, and that's something I have written about in the book as well. On the Quad, the analogy, analogies are meant to be useful, not always literal. But the idea was that, I find it as someone who's been, with the Quad all through, including the first attempt. I find Quad actually very comfortable to work with. My Quad colleagues. There's a lot that we share in our way of work. Bear in mind, culturally we are very different, but we are all deeply democratic societies, market economies, pluralistic in many ways, able to argue out positions, put things in a very direct fashion to each other. So there is a certain comfort which has actually enabled Quad to ramp up very, very significantly in a very short space of time. When I look ahead, I do see it as one of the principal mechanisms of consultation and policy making in respect to the Indo-Pacific. On BRICS and the standards criteria, yes, there were standards and criteria. These were discussed in great detail. For various reasons, it was not made public. But obviously the standards were good, which is why we have Egypt. There were certain specific issues which were considered while taking the decision, but there was a broad alignment. Do these countries align with the nature of BRICS, with the positioning of BRICS, the sort of thinking of BRICS? And I think that was the overall overarching criteria, thinking which really guided the selection of members, along with some kind of geographical regional balance. On cultural rebalancing, I do think that is a big debate of our times, which is in a globalized world, this attempt to define who's politically correct, who is not, who will give judgment on whom, who will rate whom, who will, make those decisions. To me, that's an extrapolation of the competition. That the clever guys get in, the smartest way of playing a game is to become the judge. Then you get to decide how the players have done. Now, I think there's going to be a tussle how this works. My sense is, if the economic diversity and the political diversity of the world have asserted themselves, I can't imagine that the cultural diversity will not do that. So I see that as something is coming. Sports. Look, countries like sports for two reasons. They are a reflection of competitiveness. They also are a matter of pride. I think both are reasonable. And it doesn't have to be the two countries you mentioned. Every country today at any game, it could be soccer. If a country wins a soccer final, Argentina saw it as a matter of enormous pride. So it's, to me, taking pride and preparing yourself for sports and honing those skills is a very natural part of human competitiveness. In this country, we also see that as very important to national fitness. So a lot of what we do, we have 2-3 big movements in this country. We have something called like Play India. That's a literal translation, or
Khelo India.
Khelo India, or, a kind of a fitness. So we want people to be fit. It's part, frankly, of a public health policy. It keeps a country psychologically, sharp, if you encourage that. And certainly, a lot of us in public life, we try today through personal example to exhort people to take part in sports, to stay fit, to do things. So I'm very much a votary of that kind of thinking. Last question, Indian diaspora and Bharat. There have been occasions I've had conversations, but I've felt from the interactions I've had that the book resonates, the argument, the concept resonates very much with the diaspora, as it does, in fact, with large sections of Indian society.
Okay, I'm going to, unfortunately, I'm now going to use my veto as the moderator and limit this to 4 names. So last 4 names, let me just pick them up. Sonam, you have been standing there, so I'll come to Sonam. I want to come to the brave Charlotte. She's not well, but she's still standing in the line, so I want to come to you and Carla. So you, Carla, and Sonam are the first 3, and maybe just because of persistence, I'll give it to Robert. So let's go, Sonam. Let's start with you.
Good evening, Your Excellency. I'm Sonam from Bhutan, alumni of Bisuri's Summer School of Global Governance 2017. While India is navigating the turbulent world we live in with admirable clarity of purpose, how does she plan to accommodate the concerns of Bhutan, which is caught between the 2 giants, both of which are ancient civilizational states? Given Bhutan's dependency on India for most of its needs and surplus in favor of India, how can India assure Bhutan that the concerns of countries like Bhutan and other smaller states matter? And how can competition be healthy between 2 powerful neighbors instead of the kind we have seen in Maldives? Thank you.
Charlotte?
Hello.
You can bring the mic down.
It's okay. I'll just go on my toes. So there's currently an Indian delegation in London looking to finalise the FTA with the UK. We've talked a lot about the EU and the relationship with India, but with the signing of the FTA, what will relations look like now, modern relations between the UK and India, which go back so many years? Thank you.
What would the relationships look like if you signed the FTA with UK? That's a question. We'll come to Carla and then Robert. Robert, maybe you can come in. Let's go.
Hi, thank you. You've spoken about India as a civilizational power. What's your message to allies and partners who worry about the more extremist aspects of Hindutva pride? And is there a point at which these domestic issues would start to impact India's international standing? Should you do more to reassure allies and partners in the world about that?
And finally, Carla.
Thank you. I would like to ask, there's been a lot of talk in the last few days about what a potential second...
Can you come closer to the mic?
Yes.
We can't hear you.
There's been a lot of talk about what another Trump presidency would mean for Europe. I would like to ask you, what do you think it would mean for India, also with a view to America's China policy? Thank you.
Okay. I think those 4 should be fine. Thank you. And I'm sorry we won't be able to take more. So apologies to the others.
Let me start with the Bhutan question. Look, India has a number of neighbors. Barring one, in size at least, they're all very much smaller. And in population too, in economy as well. The neighborhood first approach is really to be generous, to be non-reciprocal, to be sensitive to a lot of these neighbors. Now, neighbors will, at the end of the day, like any sovereign country, make choices and take policy decisions which suit their interests. So, in the case of Bhutan, I think for many decades, the government of Bhutan has found that its interests are best served by having a stronger, very strong relationship with India. That has been borne out on the ground by a number of developments. Bhutan, for example, a large part of its economy is to generate electricity, and the revenues it sells that to India. The revenues are obviously very helpful to Bhutan. They get a lot of tourists from India. A lot of the logistics of Bhutan go through India. So, this is not just Bhutan. I could in different ways make the case for some of the other neighbors as well. So, I haven't, far from my seeing anything which is moving in a contrary direction, I actually see Bhutan and India doubling down on that partnership. Where if you today look in terms of the literally the investments, the financial investments in the partnership, the scale of the relationship, it's far greater than it has ever been before. Today, I've actually just had a meeting with the new Bhutanese foreign minister, and the messaging from that meeting again is very, very robust. So I'm very confident, because look, at the end of the day, how do neighbors judge you? They judge you by the routine. Okay, every day, how does the daily rub work? Is trade good? Is movement of people good? Is there tourism happening there? Are we doing enough business with each other? That's one part of it. Is our security better off? The other part of it is what happens when things go wrong. Now, this part of the world saw what happened during the COVID. Every one of our neighbors, again, barring two, got their first vaccines from India. When actually there was a fuel crisis, when there is a food crisis, when they, when for whatever reason they have a particular need, we are in many ways the natural neighbor that they turn to, understandably. Perhaps nothing could be more graphic than what happened in the case of Sri Lanka. That Sri Lanka hit, what was the perfect storm. And at that time, frankly, the rest of the world, stood there with their hands in the pocket and watched Sri Lanka go through that storm. And it actually took a neighbor like India. And we, at that time, made what was for us an unprecedented decision of putting out a package of $4.5 billion for Sri Lanka. So, finally, good days, bad days, rainy days, sunny days, neighbors finally know who are the good neighbors. And I think I have every confidence that is the case with Bhutan as well. On what would life be like if we did the UK FTA, I would say if the FTA is done, if there is a balanced mutual, they get the terms right, which they would, because, they won't do an FTA if they didn't get the terms right. I suspect, both countries will stand enormously to benefit, because today, how do different economic production and consumption centers deal with each other is actually a very major point, and to the extent we can facilitate it, and certainly FTA is one way of facilitating it. Connectivity is another way of facilitating it. Digital flows is a third way of facilitating it. So the reason why we are engaged in this exercise is precisely because both of us see a lot coming out positively from that FTA. On the civilizational power, look, again, you know, is India a civilizational power? Absolutely. It is a civilizational power because it has been around for thousands of years. And there is a certain, I would say, a certain gravitas and a certain mindset which comes from having a long history and approaching the world with a very considered, deliberate, responsible, mature way. Now, the question, you know, are there people in any country, including India, who others would regard as extremists? I think it depends on your point of view. Some of it may be true, some of it may be politics. What also happens is you can have countries who would judge you by their own political standards. You know, there are countries which have vote banks who think, therefore, the rest of the world should also have vote banks. As I said, you know, this whole ratings business.
No, actually, now I remember, I was saying we heard something like this in the morning. That's why I asked him. Because I remember saying in the panel that I was moderating that in geopolitics there is sledging. And this is amounting to sledging. If you don't like something, you would possibly use it as a way of, you know, unsettling you. So I'm sure some of your travels would have seen some of this sledging.
Well,
geopolitical sledging.
You know, there's I don't know how many of you do follow cricket. There are two ways of doing with sledging. One is to sledge back, the other is to hit a six. So you take your choice. Okay. But the fact is, look, we are a very open, pluralistic society. We are frankly far more plural than any other country I can think of in the world. Now, it's to me, I'm quite prepared to have debates with people, but then all debates have to be, you know, a two-way flow. That if people have views, they must be prepared to listen to what you have to say on those views. And my sense is today, this attempt really to impose your politics on the other person is very much a driver of these kinds of comments. I mean, there could be, the political people may have others, but I think here that may not be the case. Finally, the issue on Trump. Look, President Trump was president from 2017 to 2021. We had a very good relationship with him. He came here on a visit. My Prime Minister went there on some visits. There were, you know, like any relationships, there were issues, but overall, if I look in those 4 years, did our relationship deepen? Did it grow? Absolutely, it did. So I'm not, you know, it's not just, you know, President Trump. I think if you look at India-US, from perhaps Clinton, with every presidency, the relationship has actually deepened. Now, you could attribute it to structural, you know, advantages. You could attribute it to clever diplomacy. I'm modest about it, but the fact is, it has grown, and I have every confidence that it will continue to do so.
Actually, if countries could come out unscathed, both under the Obama presidency and the Trump presidency, and were able to do well during the last 3 years as well, that would be deft diplomacy. So I think Indian diplomacy deserves a round of applause, and the Indian Foreign Minister deserves a round of applause as well for having done well in the last years. So as we close, on behalf of this group, I thought it would be proper if we give your book to each one of them. And we have distributed that. Some of them sneaked in and got signatures done. I don't know if it would be possible, but at least for the 60 of the current young batch, if it would be if it would be possible to send you back those 60 books and find some time for you to sneak a signature in over the next few days, then at least the current batch could go back with your sign. And I know 200 is a big number to ask you to sign. Done. So thanks a lot for doing that, sir. And please join me in thanking Dr. Jaishankar for his time and his intervention.